Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for the Greater Langley Chamber of Commerce Town Hall. Our guest today is Steve Vanagas, TransLink Vice President of Customer Communications and Marketing and Public Affairs. I would also like to take this moment to acknowledge that we are meeting together virtually on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish people. Steve, I'm just going to give a bit of an intro on what you're up to other than your title. From road to rail to marine, TransLink provides the Metro Vancouver region with a range of transit and transportation services. Combined, TransLink service area covers 1,800 square kilometers from Lions Bay to Langley, serving upwards of 500,000 people every day with safe and affordable, convenient transit. And I think right now those numbers are probably a little jiggled for you. As we move forward, I'm sure throughout your presentation you'll give us some more updates, and we do have some previously submitted questions that we'll get to at the end. So Steve, I'm not going to waste any time. I'm just going to turn over to you, and thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate that you are working from home, like many of us are, and able to give us some updates and information on what we can expect in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Colleen, and thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. I think I last was at one of your events. This is really dating me now. Probably about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, when I joined BC Hydro Chair Brad Bennett. And the topic of the day was Site C. That's all we were talking about. It seems like a long time ago now.
That would have been our October dinner meeting in 2017, actually. I remember it well.
Yeah. So just give me a second while I set things up here. Hang on a sec. Thanks for having me. And also, as you were speaking about the First Nations, just a reminder that we have National Indigenous Peoples Day coming up this weekend. So if any of you happen to be available for that, keep that in mind. Okay, can you guys all see my screen now?
Yep.
All righty. Well, now I got to find my notes here somewhere along the way. So just give me a second while I find my notes so I know what I'm talking about here. There we go. Alrighty, well, thanks for having me again today. Topic, as you've seen, is the future of transit and transportation here in the Metro Vancouver region. I thought I'd just spend a few minutes just giving you an update on what we're up to, how COVID has affected us, like it's affected so many of you, and what we're looking at going forward, what the future looks like in the whole region as a whole, in your area in particular as well, and then we'll do some Q&A after that. Seems like a long time ago now. The whole pre-COVID era seems like an awfully long time ago, actually. At the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, we were coming off what we considered a really, really successful year for TransLink. We were one of the fastest growing transit agency in all of North America. Our ridership had grown over 20% between 2016 and 2019. We launched all sorts of new service improvements. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. We're in the midst of a really massive long-term engagement planning exercise called T2050. Some of you may have seen it at the PNE. We reached tens of thousands of people throughout the region with that. And our successes were being recognized around the world. In fact, last year, we were named North America's top public transportation system by an American association. So we're really coming off of a really great year. And you know what, we're really proud of the fact that we've been delivering for our region. Over the course of 2019, we rolled out new service increases, more SkyTrain cars, double-decker buses. We advanced major projects like the Broadway subway, Surrey Langley SkyTrain, and I'll talk a little bit about that more at the end, towards the end of the presentation. We finalized the rollout of our new rapid bus service at the beginning of 2020, which were faster bus route, dedicated bus routes. And we've continued to lead the way on sustainability. New pilot project on zero emission battery electric vehicles, upgrading, retrofitting our facilities to be less wasteful and more efficient. in Langley in particular, as part of the mayor's 10-year vision, and I believe Val is on. Hi, Val. Mayor's 10-year vision. We made some major transit investments in the Langley area. I mean, we know that there's growing demand for transit south of the Fraser. Fraser Highway in particular is a key transit corridor. We have 13,000 bus boardings each week, 3.5 million bus boardings in that corridor each year. And we were seeing more and more overcrowding on that system all the time. Last year, we focused really on improving bus speed and reliability along the Fraser Highway. We made the 503 between Langley and Surrey Central a limited stop express with frequent service, so service every 8 or 9 minutes over during peak times. We also added articulated buses in order to expand the capacity of that corridor. And then last fall, we started installing bus priority lanes to help speed up travel. One of the things that's really important that we found is that speed of travel really makes a big difference to our ridership. People want to get moving. They're more than willing to take transit if we can assure them that we're going to be moving along and that it doesn't take too much longer than some other modes of transport. So the more we can do bus priority lanes, the more that helps our ridership. It helps people that rely on transit. And just as an aside, nearly every bus in the Langley area runs on that particular route, at least one of the routes that receive these kind of priority measures. So during peak times, that's 55 buses per hour benefit from that, from those measures. And of course, double-deckers. One of the things we did late last year in the fall was add double-decker buses to the 555 route out of Carvolth. And we did that because we know there's a lot of commuters coming from the Langley area, taking that route, get to the SkyTrain line. They take that route to get to Braid Station and jump on the Expo line, get to Millennium Line, and commute all over the region, whether it's SFU or all the way to downtown or elsewhere. That was a key route for the people of Langley. And by adding the double-decker buses, we doubled the number of seats during peak hours, making it way more comfortable for commuters from the Langley area. Now, then COVID hit, and like all the rest of you, it's had a pretty massive impact on our business and on our momentum, on our core business of carrying passengers. We saw our ridership drop really quite remarkable, 80 to 85%. I'm sure that's very comparable to many of you in the business community as well. It was an amazing drop that happened in that mid-March period of time. Just before this call, Colleen and I were just talking about, looking back, and it was only March. And at that point, I remember agonizing over the decision whether or not to send our staff home, whether or not we should have them work from home. And today it's just, we had no idea this is what we'd be talking about 3 months later. We've recovered to about 30% of our 2019 levels at this point. So the numbers, the chart you see here hasn't quite caught up with where we're at, but we're still at about 1/3 of our previous business, which is pretty low number. It is starting to rebound a little bit. We would see that growing up to about, and this is all kind of partially guesswork on our part, we're probably looking at getting up to about 50% of our previous ridership through the summer. And then over the course of the rest of the year, hoping to get that up to about 70 or 80% of previous numbers. And then we'll see where that goes from here. Again, it's very comparable to your business and your community and your local economy. It's, there'll be some rebounding, but how far and how fast, we just don't know. And so we have to plan for a number of scenarios. Now, when COVID did hit, our first response, of course, was that we had to be safe. First of all, we couldn't stop our service. We have too many people that rely on us, too many people that rely on to get around the region, and we rely on them for their work and to move goods around the region. So our focus was on serving those essential trips as safely as possible. We did it through promoting physical distancing. So we reduced our capacity, But then we opened up our rear doors. We stopped collecting fares on the bus so that people could get in just through the rear doors and wouldn't have to touch anything. We minimized the number of times they have to pass anybody, and of course that had a pretty big impact on our revenue. But we felt it was really important for us to do that and take that kind of step in order to do the best we could to keep people safe. We amped up our cleaning procedures. I'll talk about that in a second. And we did whatever we could to keep the situation safe, but we had to keep the service running. And that's because if you think about all the people that rely on the service, it's people like this. They're, even during COVID, even during the height of the situation that we were facing, we had 75,000 people a day rely on us. 75,000 people a day were traveling on a work day. 150,000 different people in a week. And 80% of those people were taking essential trips. They're either working and doing essential work, or they had to do things for grocery shopping, appointments that they can't get around in any other way. And you look at these are some of the faces of those people that relied on us. You know, grocery workers like Dave in the top left, nurses like Laura in the bottom middle. They rely on us. Dave in the top left takes 2 buses and the SkyTrain to get to work 6 days a week. Laura takes the night bus to make her 7 a.m. shift at the hospital on the weekends. And they were just 2 examples of many, many people that rely on us to get them around. Healthcare workers, service workers, grocery store workers, childcare workers. I mean, you name it, people rely on us to get around, even at the peak of the pandemic. And that's why it was so important for us to keep our service going. And we were very proud to provide that service. And we kept it very safe. To this day, there's not one example of transmission of COVID on our system. We haven't had any reports of that at all. Provincial health officer hasn't reported to us at all that transit is at all a vector for transmission. And we want to keep it that way, of course. Now, that has a financial impact, of course. We've been losing a huge number of our ridership. 58%, close to 60% of our operating costs are recovered through fare box revenue, so customer revenue. That's dropped dramatically, as you can imagine, comparable to our overall 80% drop in ridership. We also rely on fuel tax revenues. And guess what? People stop driving. They stop commuting to work as well. So overall, $75 million a month hit we've been taking from lost revenue. At this rate, we're looking at a deficit for this year, next year of best case scenario, about $540 million. Worst case scenario, we're north of $1 billion for this year, next year in terms of deficits. Totally depends on how a pandemic plays out. Totally depends on how the economy comes back and how ridership comes back. We have been having really.
Sorry, I was just going to ask you, Steve, is that based on the second projection, sort of based on the fact that we could have a second wave?
Yeah, it's that pessimistic scenario is if it all comes back and we end up in this long-term, what we call hibernation, where the economy never fully recovers for a long period of time. Okay. And we've had really, really good talks with the province. They've been very forthcoming with their support for us. We're talking to the federal government, but it remains to be seen how we're gonna pay for all of that and keep the service running. But we're working on it. We have good conversations going with the province and the federal government, and we'll see where that goes. Now, keeping the system safe. So recently we did start reopening the transit system. We needed to get more capacity out there. We've restored, we're pretty close to getting full capacity. About 2/3 of our bus capacity is out there and available. SkyTrain is running. West Coast Express and C-Bus are a little bit scaled back, but they're operating. And we want to provide that service. And in order to provide that service, we've implemented what we call the Safe Operating Action Plan. And that is essentially a series of measures we've adopted to keep the system safe and help inform people what they can do to keep themselves safe and their fellow passengers safe. So we done things like brought in pit crews, what we call pit crews at a select number of SkyTrain station. When the SkyTrain pulls into the station, we have a group of people that get on, clean it while it's turning around, and then they get off again until it makes its next run. On bus, we've doubled the number of cleanings per week on our entire bus fleet. So there's a lot of disinfecting, cleaning, sanitization that is going on. We've started to limit access at the fare gates. So on busy SkyTrain stations, we've slowed down the flow so that there's not as many people standing around and waiting. We've put street decals down on streets and SkyTrain stations so people can see how far they have to stand apart while they're waiting. And then in terms of people taking care of themselves and their fellow passenger, we launched a campaign called Wearing is Caring, which is a campaign to promote mask use or face covering use when you're on the bus or SkyTrain or waiting for one of our systems or one of our buses or SkyTrains. We want people to do that. We've seen more and more evidence that just wearing a non-medical mask or face covering can make a difference. And if you're sick without even knowing it, that can help prevent that sickness from being spread anywhere. So that's why we're doing our Wearing is Caring campaign. We're giving away about 15,000 masks over the next few weeks. Very popular campaign. We had a huge lineup at Commercial Broadway yesterday. I think we gave away about 1,000 masks to people yesterday alone. So we're doing everything we can to create this safe environment. And of course, we want customers to partner with us to help us out on this one. So scenarios, I threw this up there because we just don't know. Like we just don't know. We've got the BC Restart Plan, as you know. We're kind of going into phase 3 of the BC Restart Plan, but we just don't know what is going to happen. We're in good shape right now. The economy has started to come back. Things are starting to open up. But we're also seeing in the US and China as well that there's some hints that there might be this second wave going on or a sudden increase, and we got to watch that. We just don't know. So we've got to plan for this whole range of uncertainties when it comes to our finances. That said, we need to think about the future because we will get out of this at some point. All of us will. Your businesses will, we will as well. So we do need to start thinking about how this is all going to affect us. Physical distancing, face coverings, remote work, active transportation. We've seen a lot of things change here over the last few months. How many of those are now going to be permanent? And how many of those do we want to make permanent? How many of these changes do we now want to say, you know what? It's a better way of doing business. It's a better way of working. It's a better way of moving around. We got to think about that. We got to learn from that. It hasn't fundamentally changed our mission. And our mission is to get people around this region safely, efficiently, conveniently, and affordably. And that's what our goal is. That's what our job is. And we're going to keep on doing that. That hasn't changed. Now, I mentioned earlier a T2050 planning exercise that we did. Again, if you were at the PNE last year, you would have seen a big exhibition we had on there. This is about planning for transportation over the next 30 years. And it was interesting because when we did this public engagement, we heard from over 150,000 people in our region, pretty amazing a number of people over the course of several months. And, some of the values that we heard from the public are things you wouldn't, they're probably not surprising to you. People value our nature. They value access to nature and our parks, our natural environment, outdoor recreation. They want access. They want access, convenient, safe access to amenities and shops and jobs. They want to be mobile. And then they want better transit. I mean, we heard that people really value good choices in how they get around. They want a variety of choices, and they want to invest in. They want us to invest in more and better transit, and that's what we have to keep working towards. I think that's something that we need to keep an eye on and keep working towards. In the short term, we have to keep in mind the economy. We have to rebuild the economy. We need to be a partner in that. Everyone here in this meeting, on this call, cares deeply about the future of your community. I've never met a business community that doesn't put the community as a whole first. We all know that you need a successful transit system to support that. You need a successful transit system to support your community, your local economy, and ultimately your businesses. Because when you think about it, your employees need to get to work, healthcare workers, service workers, accountants, teachers, construction workers, you name it, they need to get around the region. And whether that's an efficient road network, transit system that works, that's convenient and affordable, active transportation options, we need a transportation system that works. And so we need to keep that focus on building that transportation system. We also need to remember that cities aren't going to go away. You know, I think there's been a lot of discussion lately about how everyone's now going to work from home. No one's going to want to live in a city anymore. We just don't see that happening. The trend historically is towards more and better cities. More people want to live in cities because they're very vital places to live. They're places to meet. They're places to enjoy tourism, amenities, concerts. We're going to have cities, and we're going to continue to invest in cities, and people are going to continue to live there. We might adapt, we might learn from this and live better, but there's still going to be cities. And that's even, and communities like Langley are going to continue to grow. People want to live in these thriving communities where people can get together. And our job at TransLink is to help people move around from community to community, from Langley to Vancouver, Langley to Surrey, what have you. That's our job. And so that's why we're going to continue investing in our capital projects. And I'll come back to that. In a moment. Let's keep in mind if congestion. So one of the topics has been, hey, I don't want to take transit anymore. Doesn't feel safe to me. I'm just going to get in my car. Well, let's set aside the fact that for a lot of people, that's just not affordable. Cars are very expensive, as you all know. Think about insurance, let alone the capital cost of buying the car, maintaining the car, and so on. That also comes with a price in terms of congestion. You know, I don't know about you guys, but I spend a lot of time on Highway 1, and it's not fun to be stuck in traffic sitting there, and a 20-minute trip becomes a 1-hour trip. That's not a lot of fun. We don't want to go back to that. I mean, or we want to minimize that. There's a lot of it already.
Even during COVID, we still have a backup every morning between Mount Lehman and 232.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Golden Ears Bridge, by the way, Golden Ears Bridge is back to 80% of where it was before COVID. So that gives you an idea of how much traffic is starting to increase. What we don't want to do is have people say, you know what, I'm not going to take transit anymore. I'm just going to hop in my car. Of course, people are going to need to do that on occasion, but we want to make sure transit remains a very viable top choice option for people because it gets them out of their cars. It reduces congestion. It reduces pollution. Congestion is bad. It's bad for the economy. It's bad for goods movement. It's bad for your mental health. It's bad for a whole host of reasons. So we don't want to give up on that. We got to keep investing in our transit system and encourage people to not take their cars. And we got to keep working on that. And in the long run, climate change. Let's not forget climate change is also, it's something we haven't talked a lot about for the last few months. We will get back to talking about this. Trust me, this is not going to go away. This is something we have to keep thinking about. Having good public transportation is an important part of combating climate change. We're determined to keep investing in options, transit options, mobility options that are clean and are viable options. That's really important. Decisions we're making right now give us that opportunity to recover and build to the future and build and address climate change. So we've got to keep thinking about that. And so then in terms of the city itself, we need to think about how all of these changes, how many of them do we want to make permanent? I mean, I got to tell you, I don't miss my commute right now. I'm happy to be working at home. It's not bad to not be in my car or jumping on a SkyTrain and Cbus and spending that hour plus per day getting back and forth to work. That said, I mean, offices will be coming back in one form or another. People will be back in offices. They will be going back to schools. We're doing, the UBC and SFU are doing a lot more online learning this coming fall, but they're also going to be doing in class, and that will continue to come back into place. So, we're learning about telemedicine as has become a real benefit, but people will still need to go to hospitals. They still will need to go to in-person appointments. We've seen a sharp increase in bicycle sales and lots of interest in e-bikes that get you around much more easily if you're going up hills, for example. So these are changes that are going to transform the way we work, the way we get around. And we're going to have to look to see how that transforms our communities, our cities. Communities like Langley. Can communities like Langley make their neighborhoods more livable than ever before? We're seeing a lot more movement to outdoor cafes, outdoor restaurant spaces. We're seeing more dedicated pedestrian and cycling corridors so that people can move around in those ways whenever possible. Bus priority lanes is something else we can work on. So we need to look at this and learn from it and see what changes we can put in place and keep in place now that'll help create these communities and these transportation corridors that we want. It's going to be a very interesting time going forward, and we've got a lot to learn and a great opportunity here to actually improve everything that we've been working on. Now, I'm just going to take a moment to talk about Surrey Langley SkyTrain. I know this is a massive project for your members and the people of the Langley area. Don't need to tell you this, but I will anyway, because it's a presentation, so I kind of have to. There's a huge need for good transportation options in south of the Fraser. It's the fastest growing region in British Columbia. By 2050, Surrey, Langley, City of Langley, Township of Langley are expected to add over 400,000 people by 2050. So just imagine that demand for transportation, imagine the potential for congestion, but a lot of potential for good transportation corridors as well. Surrey Langley SkyTrain, great project, 16 kilometers, elevated guideway, right now being planned to be delivered in stages, 8 stations, 3 bus exchanges, park and ride spaces, 55 SkyTrain vehicles, and an operations and maintenance center to service the full extension. Really, really big, important project. Where are we at on it? Oh, sorry, some of the benefits. Again, I'm sure you all know this already, but it gets you from Langley Center to King George in 22 minutes. It saves hundreds of thousands of annual travel time, replaces thousands of daily car trips, many, many benefits. One thing I think that's interesting, 80,000 residents will live within 800 meters of the new stations by 2035. So it's a huge number of people that would benefit from this project, let alone all the construction work, the jobs, the local business jobs, the worker employment. I mean, it's going to be a really good project. Current status, we're working through the business case. The business case has gone to senior levels of government. They're working through them. They know how crucial this project is to the region's transportation system. We think the business case is a really good business case. They were submitted to senior levels of government back in January. We're working with them. We're hoping to get additional funding for the remainder of the project. So as you know, we've got enough funding right now to get to Fleetwood. We're continuing to push for getting it all the way to Langley. We think that's important for us. Obviously, the financial situation we're in right now is a tough one. I outlined to you how much money we're in deficit on, so that's something that creates a little bit of uncertainty. We're going to continue working with the Mayor's Council, continue working with the board, continue talking to senior levels of government about extending the project. We think that there's an opportunity coming up with stimulus, with economic stimulus programs, that perhaps we can seek additional funding because of that. At the moment, we're looking at procurement beginning at the end of July. As you know, the Mayor's Council has already approved Surrey's contribution to the project, so that's great news. And then we're looking at launching the project in the fall. So things are looking good, a little bit of uncertainty because of the situation, but we're determined to keep going on it. And we're hopeful that the senior levels of government can help us finish off the entire project, and so that we can do this all. That's a hopeful, but let's cross our fingers on that and keep the pressure on. So with that, I think I'm just going to wrap it up. I think that if you believe in this region and the success of this region, you have to believe that transit is a big part of that. And I think transit is going to be a big part of the success of the Fraser Valley generally, and Langley in particular. Your community is so important to the success of our region. We want to be there with you, in partnership with you, and help you make your communities a really positive, thriving place to live and work. And we're looking forward to working with you on that. So with that, Colleen, I'm just going to wrap up, and I think we'll have some questions.
That's great. Thanks so much, Steve. A lot of the questions you have covered off on, but I think we can dive a little bit deeper into the odd one. And thank you for that. I know we last Tuesday hosted our MPs, MLAs, and mayors for our annual Langley Leadership Panel on our virtual dinner meeting. Hey, Mayor Val. And we were able to then have some questions about, of course, we talked about the stimulus packages. Almost every major event over history, World War II, World War I, the government, to stimulate the economy afterwards, of course, looks at shovel-ready projects. So I think right now you've got 6 very excited elected officials in Langley that are willing to get out to the marching bands and the cheerleaders, if we need them, to promote this project. I mean, MP Teiko Van Popta has said any opportunity he gets to mention the funding for the project as it's shovel ready, he's doing so. And I think just keeping that pressure on every level of government is going to be what we all work on in the background. As a chamber lobbying for that, that's definitely a priority for us, is making sure we can get that second phase out of Fleetwood and get it to downtown Langley.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that we've gotten a lot of really good, strong signals from local elected officials, local councils. I mean, everyone I think is on board with this. And I think the timing actually it works out nicely as the federal government looks for projects to put money into. Here's a really good one. It's ready to go. Yeah. It has absolutely well-defined benefits. It is good for the environment. It's good for building communities. It'll be good for the economy, and we can get it going really fast.
I think one of the other things that was mentioned by MP Tamara Jansen was she was a little concerned, and she's lobbying greatly to make sure. There's been rumor that some of the transit authorities in the East were given some immediate financial aid from the federal government. And so she's making sure that, we're not being left out as the West Coast, as sometimes happens with the feds. So, if there's anything that I think as a chamber network through the local area, we're coming up to a national agenda. We've got our Canadian Chamber AGM coming up in September, October, virtually. But again, if there's anything that we can do as a network to support that and make sure that you get through this, because it is important to every community in the Lower Mainland. If we can't get our goods and services around and our people to move those things around where they need to be, then we're going to be in big trouble.
The federal government has committed money to helping municipalities and transit, but they haven't actually transferred any of that money yet. We've been working with them from day one. They've been very receptive to us talking to them, but they've always seen transit as more of a provincial, part of provincial jurisdiction. And so they have not actually sent any money to any Eastern transit agencies. Some of the provinces have stepped up with some money. Others have major municipalities, like regional sized municipalities, that have stepped up with some money, but the feds haven't yet. They've committed money, but they haven't actually transferred anything yet.
Right. So let's sort of look at let's sort of take it as the next year, 2020, 2021, going into this. You mentioned it yourself, ridership, not everybody's offices are back up and running. And I know for a lot of corporate British Columbia that usually works in the downtown core, there's sort of been that direction to keep them out of the offices downtown until January at this time. So with that affects some of your movement of people downtown. Are you looking at sort of shifting and scaling things around if areas get busier because locals are trying to get around versus the downtown core? Is TransLink willing to kind of, for lack of a better word and a very overused word, pivot to sort of changing what you need to do for the ridership at this time?
Yeah, very much so. Very, very much so, because this is changing. We like you said, we don't know exactly where it's going to go. We know downtown commuting is down. We don't know how that's going to recover. We've had some businesses say we're opening up in September, others longer than that. Some of them are telling their workers to stay off transit. They'll have to overcome that. But there's other impacts as well. The universities have said that they're going to limit the large classes they have. A lot of classes will be online. So that reduces another big audience for us, which is university students. Public schools, we'll see if they open up on time in the fall. And then a big part of our traffic is also major events, concerts, sporting events, tourism, people getting around the region as tourists, as visitors. And that's going to be opening up in a very uncertain way over the rest of the year. So absolutely, the patterns of ridership are very much going to change, and we have to adapt to that. And we have started to do that so that we are being flexible about dedicating more of our resources to really, really busy corridors right now. So during COVID, the busiest corridors were the ones serving hospitals.
Yeah.
Think about VGH, think about those major hospitals. They were very big, heavy used corridors. So we wanted to make sure that we continue to serve those. And we'll be doing more like that. So we're going to keep a very close eye on where our busiest corridors are. Scott Road, for example, in Surrey Delta border, very, very busy area, a very high traffic area for transit throughout the COVID period. And that's an area we're going to continue to invest in and increase service wherever possible. So we're going to keep a very close eye on it. And wherever we see these patterns of ridership spiking up, we're going to be looking to see if we can put in more resources if we can.
Right. And you touched on one of my next questions was, I know my daughter's going into her 5th and final year of university. If she goes to Trinity Western, so it's not a long commute for her. But for them and for KPU, I know majority of courses are going online for 2021. And so things like labs or classes that require them to be actual physically in class, they're able to social distance and do those in such a way that they can. But like you said, ridership to SFU and UBC is going to be really streamlined. And we also have the reduction in international students that'll be coming back due to borders closing and other things. So that will definitely make for an interesting year that way. Because that's a huge portion of your ridership is university students. I mean, we know that that's a cost factor for them, and the transit system is geared to them in some cases. So, so you'll have to, I'm glad I don't have your job. Mine's bad enough right now.
I'm glad I don't have Shirley's job. She's the one who has to help figure these things out along with our planners.
Through that,
I just show up at meetings like this.
One day at a time.
Exactly. So let's touch on a few things. You've touched on the SkyTrain, of course. It's near and dear and a pillar for all of us here. So is there anything that you know that we can do to assist you in those lobby efforts right now?
Yeah, I think just continuing the conversation. You mentioned the Canadian Chamber having a meeting, making sure transit is considered as a funding source. We need relief funding to keep operating, and then we're available to help with stimulus funding. So both of those things are really important. We need federal support for us to continue operating. That's important for us to stay alive over the next year or so as we go through this period of time. They've said they're going to do that, so we have to keep following up with them. And then as they consider that economic recovery package, they're going to look for capital projects that are shovel ready, as someone mentioned. They want projects that can go quickly. And we're there. We have a lot of projects that are in midstream or very close to being executed. And Surrey Langley SkyTrain is one of them. It's a very big project. It's one of the biggest projects in all of Canada. We're ready to go. And if you keep advocating for that, that will help us out, and it helps you out as well.
Definitely. Okay, great. You touched on a lot of the safety measures, and I really actually quite liked the Wearing is Caring campaign. And if you could send, or somebody, I'll touch base, but if we can get some more information on that, we'll get that out onto our social media and cross promote that and get that out there. So with that, are you finding that the majority of people are following the rules and regulations and kind of maintaining that? And if not, do you have a way of kind of, for lack of a better word, policing the sort of the safety protocols?
I think people are trying, but it's hard. You know, you get on a bus, you get on a SkyTrain. SkyTrain actually hasn't been that crowded. It's the buses that are crowded, and it's tough, right? Because it's a small space, and it's hard to maintain that distance, and so that's a challenge. But that's why we're encouraging people to wear a mask, and that's what we really want to focus on right now. We're estimating that currently we have about a third of the people, about 30%, who use a mask right now. And we need to get that way up. We need to get up to 70, 80%, if not more. We really don't want to make it mandatory because people push back when it's mandatory, right? Like, this is something that I think everybody should be part of. It's not just protecting yourself, it's actually protecting your fellow passenger. And the faster we can get over this period of time, the faster we can all get back to business, go back to work. So we want people to wear that mask. We're giving masks away if you don't have one, but we're encouraging that mask use. And that's something that we really, really want to encourage. We kicked off that campaign this week and last week, and we're hoping that people adopt it because we think it's pretty important.
No, I agree. I really agree with you on that one. As I said into some of the smaller businesses I've gone into, and they're like, "Oh, you're wearing a mask." I said, "I'm wearing a mask for your protection because I've been in 6 different stores today. It's not that I don't feel safe coming in here. It's just it's a small space and I can't get far away from you." And they're like, "Oh," and I always sort of premise it as I'm wearing this for your safety, not mine, because they've proven that that's the difference, right? Um, so you just mentioned one of the things when you talk about funding. One of the policies that's been on the books for the Greater Langley Chamber, and we were working diligently on, was the mobility pricing aspect of looking at. And the slide you showed of your previous income and then your current, we know that you are funded in majority by people walking through the door and paying, and the, the taxes that come from gas. And as we move into more ridership, gas taxes are going to drop because we're getting people out of their cars. Is that still, I know it's not an idea of this provincial government, but if for TransLink, is that still one of those projects that's on the shelf and is a possibility of let's take a look at if it's one of the ways of funding you?
Well, I think that we have to look at all the revenue sources. Gas tax revenue in the long run is going away. People are switching to electric vehicles. That is a trend that is continuing. We see that in the numbers. Our fuel tax revenues are in a long-term decline. And before COVID, they were actually declining faster than we expected, in part because gas taxes had gone really, really high, or gas prices had gotten really high, that people were switching out of commuting with their cars, and they were also switching to electric vehicles. So it's a long-term trend. It's not going to be around forever. We need to find other sources of revenue. Mobility pricing is one. It's a lot of work was done last year on looking at the options. There are a lot of benefits to doing mobility pricing. There's also consequences to it. As we know from people living in the Fraser Valley, we heard loud and clear that they didn't think it was fair for them to pay a toll, and other people taking other bridges weren't paying any toll. So there's a fairness element that you have to look at, and there are ways to overcome those kind of fees. But it is an option that everyone has to look at. There's nothing imminent happening. It's not something that's part of a discussion right now, but it's certainly not off the table in the longer term. I think everyone at some point has to have that discussion around how do you pay for these things.
Yeah.
How do you pay for transportation systems? How do you pay for your roads? You got to keep building roads and maintaining roads. I mean, you got to pay for them somehow, and so we have to have that kind of conversation. So mobility pricing is an option. Nothing in the short term, though.
Okay, great. Just need to know if I need to dust off that policy a bit, that's all. Industrial parks in Langley. We've got Gloucester onto the one side, and we've got Campbell Valley Park, which is actually it's in Surrey, but we still claim a corner in Langley. But a lot of people that work in Aldergrove and Langley, live in the area, commute to those places for work. I know that in the fall of last year, we were having conversations with various members of your organization, and there was a survey done on Gloucester to kind of look at. The last correspondence we had was back in February, and of course, it's all kind of paused at this time. But we were looking at, let's have that conversation again, because we're finding the manufacturers out there, a lot of them are giving me some feedback on their inability to hire, to get people to those jobs. So, and I'm wondering if there's a way that, and it's an awkward situation because Gloucester's like right on BC Transit and TransLink's line. It's kind of like, we have to figure out where are the employees coming from? Are they coming from your side of the transportation, or are they coming from BC Transit's side of the transportation? Or is there a mix of both? And, is there something that we can do to maybe hasten that conversation moving forward?
Yeah, we were talking to them, as you pointed out earlier this year, and having good conversations with them. People think buses are the only options. It's not always that may not always be the best option for an industrial park like that. We work with a number of industrial parks around the region who have a very, very similar situation. Annacis Island, for example. Areas on the North Shore. I mean, there's a number of them in the region that face exactly the same situation. We have a number of workers who need to get from point A to point to the industrial park, and there's no transit access, right? Mm-hmm. Not everyone can drive, and so on. So transit bus service is not the only option. We also look to see, is there a van pool service that is a possibility? Could there be some sort of a dedicated shuttle service created, dedicated, and it can be done privately, that we could help establish between the industrial park and say a SkyTrain station or a bus loop, right? So we try to work with the industrial park and see what the options are. How can we help with that? Is there a bus route that's nearby that we could theoretically repurpose or shift to serve that area? That would be ideal if that's even possible. But we look at all of those options. So at some point we will start that conversation going again with Gloucester Estates and carry on, because we know that's a big area of employment and we want to help with that. We absolutely want to help with that and reduce that barrier.
Definitely. That's fantastic, because that's sort of been one of the things that's been on my plate since I started with Langley about 4 years ago. Somebody said, if you could fix this right away, I'm like, okay, well, we'll start the conversation and see what we can do. I know that one of the major leaseholders out there has 11 properties right now that are asking them, and they have 25 properties in the area. So they're having that conversation as well. So we're going to sort of kick off those emails that I'd gotten from the right people in your organization. We're going to kick off that conversation again and see if we can start moving it forward. We're starting to get back to the work that we were working on pre-COVID, and policies and getting things moving and looking forward. So with that, financially, if we've all talked about second wave, the last sort of conversation I had with some people at the provincial government was originally they were talking September, October, November. We've managed our numbers so well in our organizations and everything here in BC, and managed to, as humans, really clamp it down. They're sort of talking now November, December could be a second wave. How is TransLink sort of crystal ball moment planning for that possible second wave, and if you have to almost shut down again?
Yeah, it's kind of like you guys, right? Like it's guesswork. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know when it's going to happen. I think we've learned a few lessons around making sure that we're prepared. The first few weeks was a scramble to have supplies, supply chain in place, cleaning supplies, PPE for our drivers and our frontline workers. So we need to make sure those things are all in place. We've got a lot of the infrastructure now in place around physical distancing, sanitization of the system and so on. So we're going to have to keep looking at all of those elements and just be ready. I'm not sure that there's anything else we can do, but just sort of we're mentally prepared for this. We've got a lot of physical things that are in place, a lot of procedures we've changed to make it safer. And we'll have to just keep going on that and be prepared for that. I'm not sure what else there is we can do. Frankly.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's same thing. I made sure we've got everything. We've just opened the office this week full time for some employee. One employee is working Monday to Friday, and then others are coming in and out as they can. A couple are still working from home due to children and not in school and things like that. So again, it's just getting that supplies in place and everything's up and ready. So I said to the team, whatever happens moving forward, we're kind of semi-prepared for it. And, we've also worked out a lot of the different bugs on how do we keep moving forward with, town halls like this and getting this information out to our members. So but I can now I've covered off most of my questions. If anybody's got a question, I would ask you to pop it into the chat box, and I'm happy to get that information up to Steve. Steve, is there anything else you wanted to cover off on, or?
No.
Yeah. I mean, again, we'll be a champion for you on the shovel-ready projects. We've got a couple here in Langley we're really not going to be quiet about. Highway 1 from 216th to Mount Lehman or further is one of them. And again, it just opens up the corridors, provides the port with more things. I mean, with RBT2 possibly coming online in the next 2 years, all of these functions of getting goods and services around, I think more than ever, once we get through this, we're going to need to have those systems in place. Otherwise, congestion is going to be an issue. Somebody just popped up and said, what about installing vending machines for masks?
We're looking at that. Absolutely, we're looking at that for sure. I know some other jurisdictions have done that, and we're definitely looking at that.
Actually, it would be a good one to give to BC Ferries too. If they're making it mandatory, at least let people buy them when you get on the boat. There you go. Yeah. Built it. Great. Are you using UV lights to disinfect at this time?
Not yet. We're looking at that technology. Again, it's a technology that a few of the other transit agencies around the world are trying right now. So we have to see what the results are of that. We're going to let them kind of experiment with that, pilot that, and we'll learn from that. If it works, we'll invest in that.
If you're going to look at that, we've actually got a manufacturer right here in Langley out at Gloucester, who's a original Philips Lighting. They've got their Canadian manufacturing core here in Langley, and they're working on a system right now.
So while you said that, that reminds me that I should mention that yesterday we announced the launch of our open call for innovation, which is we are asking inventors, innovators, entrepreneurs, local businesses to come to us with their ideas for how to improve the cleanliness and safety of the system through this COVID era. So we're opening it up. We've got this accelerated process. So if you've got an invention, an innovation of some sort that you think will improve cleanliness, say UV lights, for example, come to us, make a proposal. We're going to accelerate and fast track the review. And if we think that there's something there, it will come to a fast agreement and implement it. We just announced that yesterday. And so that's exactly the kind of thing that we're looking for and exactly the kind of business that we would hope considers entering into that process. Excellent.
I will make sure I connect the dots there for him. Rudy's just asked yet another question. Oh, I bounced around. Sorry, Rudy. What are we learning from other transit systems in North America to restore confidence for riders?
Yeah, so it's interesting. A lot of the things that we're doing very commonly around the world, North America and Europe and Asia as well, we're all kind of sharing notes. There's multiple calls a week, frankly, either internationally here in Canada or North America wide, where all these agencies are comparing notes and trying different things. And we're all learning from one another because we're all at different stages of it. You know, some of the jurisdictions have gone through the worst of it and are now recovering. Others are still in the midst of it. So we have learned quite a bit. We're learning from them around, you know, cleaning procedures, cleaning practices, you know, many other things that we're all looking at. One of the things you saw was how we blocked off seats in our buses when we first started with COVID. That's something we saw other agencies doing successfully. So where we physically put a sign in place at a seat so people wouldn't sit there and create more physical distancing. That's an example of how we were learning from others. And they're learning from us as well. Just before I got on this call, we had the Sacramento Transit Authority contact us to see if they could use our Wearing is Caring campaign that we just launched around masks. They liked our creative, so they've asked if they could use it. And of course, we've said yes. But that's the kind of thing that we end up sharing. It's a very collegial environment and we're learning from one another. So absolutely we are.
Same with our network. It's amazing that the, you know, innovation and conversation, and sometimes, you know, somebody can be stuck on one little thing and everybody else goes, oh, this is what we did. And everybody goes, well, why didn't we think of that?
Yeah.
It's just, you know, it's amazing how the discussions really helped people move forward. Just for everybody's information, I just dropped the link to the open call for innovation into the chat box for you. Click through and go ahead and please share that. I'm going to get it out to my team today to get it out on social media. And I've got a few people right away that I'm going to think I'll send it off to and target so that they can get back to you on that. That's fantastic. Any further questions from anyone, or Steve, any final words from today on this? I really appreciate you taking the time and coming out. Oh, are there special provisions for drivers who won't show up for shifts?
We actually haven't had a lot of absenteeism, to be honest with you. It's you know, there was a period of time there where everyone was kind of worried about it. Like, do we show up for work? Do we not show up for work? We put in place, we worked closely with the drivers, with the union to make sure we were putting precautions in place. We've provided them with PPE, gloves, mask, hand sanitizer. We've also installed kind of a shower curtain type of plastic divider to separate the driver from the entrance, so that there's that like a curtain, if you will. So we actually haven't seen a lot of absenteeism. There's a little bit, but you know, it hasn't been bad. They've been great. They understand what an important role that they play in the system and getting people around, and we really appreciate that. And we've worked really well with them.
That's fantastic. I know that I've said from the beginning of this is that, you know, everybody's going to adapt and roll out into different phases differently. We need to be patient. We need to be kind. We need to be understanding. There's some people that I know that are like, nope, I'm not leaving my house yet. I'm not going out. And there's others that ran out the door to go do what they want to do. So I think, again, we're all going to adapt and move forward at a different pace. And as long as we're patient and understanding, I think we can get through it together. So Steve, I really, really want to thank you for your time today. Let's see what we do in a couple of months. Maybe we'll touch base with you again and get an update. If we can get a major announcement on SkyTrain, we'll definitely get you back to talk about how that represents in Langley and what we can do moving forward. Again, thank you for taking off your Friday morning to join us today. Thank you to everybody else for coming out. I ask you to take a look at our upcoming events. Just a heads up, we do have an event coming up with our local RCMP talking about how to keep your business safe when it's closed or when you're doing lower hours, and give you kind of an update on what's going on there. So Steve, thank you very much for today. Thank you for everybody, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You too, Rudy. Thanks.